would you guys be okay with, or would it be, would it be okay? Not you guys, but would it be okay if, unlike the show where the contestants didn't know going in to the Squid Games that they were going to be murdered, but if they had signed a contract where they knew that they could, all of the stuff, like they could win this amount of money, but there'd only be one left standing, but if you lost, you die.
I think so. I think the contract has to be extremely clear.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would have to do that. The reason I say I think so is because I think that's consistent with things like right to try, for example. And this is a really wild stretch in a lot of ways. But I do think there are situations where you have the right to put yourself in danger and to assume risk, right? But I would say that you need to be exceptionally clear of that risk, and you need to make exceptionally certain that everybody who is participating was making the decision consciously and of sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
Squid Games does not do that.
Squid
Games does not inform people of the vast majority of the risks.
Second time, though, they do.
Sort of. They're still, even then, very implied.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
true.
they're not so clear. Like, it's the same rules on the second time versus the first time.
Like, elimination means death.
But yeah, they just say you will be eliminated from the game, which is like, oh, okay, I'll play this game for a possible 40 billion won or whatever, and it's only what did we decide, like 20 something million dollars?
38
million dollars. Okay. I mean, $38 million is a decent amount of money, but like
that does not,
for a 1 in 456 chance where everyone else is dead.
I mean, I'm not saying that there is no number that exists that would get me to participate in that game, but $38 million is not that number.
I actually think there is, just given the odds, I think there's no number that exists. Like, the odds are shockingly poor to win.
Yeah.
And not knowing what the games are, not knowing whether or not I actually had a chance at winning the games or yeah. No, I don't really think so.
For me personally, you're right.
So.
A number probably doesn't exist. I've got a family. Yeah. I've got responsibilities and things that I care about.
Yeah. But what if you did win?
No.
But I will accept the premise that
I would have to live with that, and that's still not a great proposition.
Right. But I will accept the premise. Well, that's the other thing too. Like, if you survive, like, you're surviving with tremendous trauma.
But if everybody knew coming in what the situation was. Are we talking about the Squid Game, or are we talking about the libertarian?
I don't know.
Dream?
Either way, it's tremendous trauma. I don't know what you're talking about. But look.
Don't contracts make everything go away?
They do not. Yeah. They definitely don't.
I'm just being a troll right now.
Yeah. No, look, I don't think so. I mean, I think that all I'm saying is there's a version of things where you can assume risk, and people do that all the time, right? Like, football players assume risk of CTE and stuff like that, right? I mean, it's not ideal, it's not great, and people...
Well, unfortunately, we saw on the set of Rust something similar.
For sure. So the set of Rust is a pretty good example of this, although the set of Rust is... So there is an assumed risk. I've been talking about this for the last 5 days. Whatever. In podcast land, it was like a couple weeks ago, but like whatever, for like a long time. The set of Rust is an interesting one because movie sets, the way that you're supposed to handle guns is pretty well spelled out for most films. Like, SAG-AFTRA has a lot of rules and guidelines on that kind of stuff. The props community has a lot of rules and guidelines about all of this kind of stuff. You hire a professional weapons handler. The professional weapons handler is the one that's actually responsible for making sure that the gun is unloaded and whatever. If you're an actor, you have every right to inspect the gun. You have every right to ask somebody to show you every detail about it. But at the end of the day, it's the weapons master that's in charge. And so it's on the weapons master to make sure that things don't happen, such as leaving 3 guns on a table unattended that are not in your control, or allowing somebody else, like even the assistant director, to pick that gun up and hand it to somebody else. That stuff is like not at all okay, right? But that said, there's still some assumed risk if you're going to shoot a movie like a Western that's going to involve guns. If you're going to shoot John Wick, you're around several dozen guns, several dozen firearms, many of which are going to be fully functional weapons. Now, they should only only fire blanks, or there are situations on set where they fire live rounds. It's hopefully increasingly rare. It's not very common to begin with, but I would hope people do it less and less. But in those cases, you're supposed to, like, as an armorer, you're supposed to, like, literally set all of those guns aside, set all of the ammunition aside, label all of that super clearly. So the assumed risk for an actor to participate in such a movie is there are dangerous objects on set. We're going to make them as safe as possible. The assumed risk is not, hey, randomly, any one of these guns could just launch a projectile at somebody else. Like, that shouldn't be the assumed risk, right? So that's where it gets tricky, because you don't want to be like, that's what I was saying, like with your contractual ideas, like, I'm okay with it, except for you've got to spell it out ultra specifically. Because you can't just go like, hey, you'll be eliminated from the games.
No, you got to be pretty clear what elimination means.
Yeah.
And also, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I'm okay with it, but I would go so far as to say that I would not actively try to prohibit it.
Yeah, I guess I would put
that's a nuance that.
Yeah, I would put it that way.
Like, real fine, but
I would very strongly discourage it. But I also don't actually think it's likely. This is the other piece of this.
Yeah.
Is
Also,
like
yes.
You get a lot of that kind of stuff, especially when you talk about things in sort of a stateless, anarchic kind of world where people are like, well, what if this happened?
Murder
like,
games will be running rampant.
But like, why? Why would anybody do this? Because again, if your odds were, I'm 1 out of 500 people and everybody's going to die a brutal death except for one, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think many people are doing that. It almost doesn't matter how desperate you are, because everything else has a live another day and try again option. Just doesn't have that option, you know? It's this why, like, right to try is interesting, because, like, right to try is like, that option is not there, right? The option is, I try this and hopefully live another day. Mm-hmm. If I don't try this, I'm certainly not living another day.
Yeah.
So that's like flipping that on its head. So you're
really
actually trying experimental stuff in order to extend. Whereas in this case, you're trying something really stupid and experimental with a very strong possibility that you'll never get to try anything again, which I don't see why you'd do that. I don't see why anybody would make that choice.